A boy without any magic aims to become the greatest magician in the world. A boy named Will Serford is standing in the corridor, saying to himself that being a magician is the most valuable thing at the prestigious Rygarden Magical Academy. But is there any way for the magicless to advance at this academy? He can compensate for this by killing monsters in the dungeons, which will help him earn credits. Professor Edward is teaching magic in the classroom. He calls Will to perform magic in front of the class. Will tries, but he fails to do any magic and gets humiliated. The professor insults him by saying that he can't even perform the most basic of magic. In the meantime, another student from the class stands up and performs the magic to humiliate Will further. His name is Cyan Ulster. The professor says that in this world, magic is the absolute authority, and if you cannot do magic, you are useless. Students who are unable to do any magic should drop out of this academy. After the class, Cyan starts insulting Will again for not being able to do magic. He says that Will does not belong here and that earning credits by killing monsters in the dungeon will get him nowhere. Colette comes and stands in front of those boys to protect Will. She says that Will is kinder and harder working than Cyan. Cyan laughs and says that kindness and hard work won't make him a great mage. Colette says to Will that there is nothing to worry about. Will replies by saying that there is no need to worry when he has such a cute girl protecting him. Colette starts shouting, saying that he should never talk like this to anyone. Colette starts blushing and pushes Will away. Will starts looking at the skies. Colette asks him if there is anything wrong. Will says how beautiful it is today. Colette says that it is beautiful because the most powerful wizards, Magiavander, continue to uphold the sky. Will narrates that long ago people were trapped in the sky. They knew nothing of the sky. The world was terrorized by a celestial host until 5 wizards turned back the invaders and cast a spell that brought peace to our world. Those were called Magiavander, and even today, everyone dreams of becoming a mage. Colette asks Will if the Ice Maiden's wand, Albisvina, is watching over them today. Will says that she is watching over them by sitting beside the window. Will goes into a flashback and remembers himself as a little boy sitting beside his friend Elfaria. She says that on the other side of the world, all the things are bright red, which is the loveliest thing in the world. She says that if they become Magiavander, maybe they will be able to see the other side of the world. They both promised each other to become Magiavander. Elfaria fulfilled the promise and became the youngest ever to become Magiavander and left for the top of the tower. But I am still scrambling to achieve that dream of standing beside her. Professor Werkner scolds Will for going to the dungeon without permission. Will apologizes and asks him to give credits to him. The professor gives Will 2 credits. The professor asks Will if he still hasn't given up on becoming a Magiavander. Will asks him if it is wrong. The professor says to Will that without magic, it is difficult to earn enough credits to achieve that goal. He says that killing monsters in the dungeon will not be sufficient to get those credits. Will gets sad. The professor reminds him in a cheerful voice that he still needs to earn 4 credits by the end of this week. Will starts searching for a monster that is worth 4 credits. The professor tells him that there is a Baskerville on the 6th floor that will help him earn those credits. Will hugs him in gratitude. Cyan hears the whole conversation and plans to kill Baskerville so that Will would not be able to get those credits. Later, Will goes to the dungeon. He is giving confidence himself by saying that he has already killed a Baskerville before, so this time it will be easy. He says to his cat Kiki that they only need to be aware of its fire breath. At the same time, Cyan and his friends are also in the dungeon. He says that there is no place for a talentless person like Will in the Magic Academy. He plans to kill the monster himself to get Will expelled from the academy. Cyan's friend asks him if it is safe for them to come to the 6th floor of the dungeon. Cyan gets angry at him for underestimating his power. They apologize to Cyan and start moving deep into the dungeon. Suddenly, a ferocious monster attacks them. They scream with fear. Will hears those screams and runs towards them. Will sees Cyan and his friends being attacked by an evil sentinel, which is worth 10 credits to Will. It was strange for a sentinel to be on this floor of the dungeon. Cyan attacks it with his magic, but his magic has no effect on the sentinel. Edward tells Werkner that they went to the 6th floor. Werkner says that there is no need to worry about them as Will is also on that floor. Will is fighting bravely with the sentinel. He cuts a finger off its hand. He defends himself with his sword. He jumps to the back of the sentinel and stabs it. Sion is watching all this astoundingly and cannot believe his eyes. Professor Edward and Werkner is also watching all this on the magic crystal globe. Professor Edward could not believe what he was seeing. Professor Werkner says that Will is the true outlier. He possesses superhuman strength that a mage would never possess, a physique as robust as a dwarf, and great observational skills to learn the moves of his opponents. He is a true warrior in the magic world. Will takes the sentinel's weapon. He repels the sentinel's power beam with it, and manages to kill the sentinel. Will goes to Sion and asks him if he is hurt. Professor Edward smashes his hands on the table in disbelief. He says that he would not stand for it that a boy who cannot even use magic is able to surpass him. Will puts the sentinel's head on Professor Werkner's table. He awards him 10 credits. Flashback, 5 years earlier, when Will was 10 years old, he was being bullied by his classmates for not being able to use magic. They all questioned his stay at the magic school. That's when Professor Werkner took him to the principal. She gave him a sword. After seeing Will's exhibition of doing wonders with a sword, she allowed Will to continue studying at the school. Will asked if he stayed at the academy, would he be able to reach the highest level and go to Elfie? The principal affirmed that if he worked hard and was diligent, then he could reach the top of the tower. The next day, Professor Werkner was teaching in the classroom. He said that to reach the level of Magia Vandor, one must get recognized by the upper institute. To reach that level, one must create a new kind of magic, or earn at least 7,200 credits at the academy. Only people with extraordinary abilities can complete this journey. Will and Colette were walking together discussing how Professor Werkner's supplementary class was so tiresome. Will also praised that it was kind of Professor Werkner to give them supplementary classes so that they could graduate. Sion and his friends were telling everyone how it was Sion who slayed the sentinel in the dungeon last night. Sion saw Will and grabbed him by his collar and started insulting him again. But this time he was acting like this because he was so embarrassed that it was Will who saved him in the dungeon. Colette intervened and saved Will again. She inquired if something had happened between him and Sion. Will replied, no. Professor Edward was in Principal Cauldron's office asking her to expel Will from the academy as he could do no magic. He said that this academy had no need for anyone who is a warrior and not a mage. Cauldron showed a book stating a tremendous academic record of Will. She said that it was impossible for her to expel a student with such a fine record. Edward insisted that Will wanted to be a Magia Vandor without being able to use any magic, and that was why it was necessary to expel him from the academy. The principal said to Edward that if he was so determined to expel Will from the academy, then he should take a test of Will personally. In this way, everyone would be certain of Will's capabilities. Cauldron said that if he failed, then Edward could decide the fate of the boy as he pleased. Will and Colette were in the locker room. Colette was helping Will to open his locker. Will was telling her about the Battle of Garzaronso and the heroics of the dwarves when Professor Edward appeared and asked Will to accompany him to Spell Hall as he wanted to take a supplementary test of Will. Edward told Will that he wanted to ascertain his worth by himself. He told Will that his assignment was to land a single strike on him. Should he succeed, he would be awarded 5 credits, but if he failed, he would be expelled from the academy. Let's begin, he said. Professor Werkner entered the principal's office and asked why he was summoned. The principal replied that she wanted him to see something. She cast a spell that showed Will and Edward fighting. Werkner asked, "What is this?" Cauldron said that Edward was conducting a test of Will to determine his worthiness of becoming a Magia Vandor. Werkner said that it was cruel to let Will fight against Edward because he was the closest to actually becoming a Magia Vandor. Edward attacked Will with a dark magic spell. Will tried to attack him, but Edward blocked it effortlessly with a magic shield. Professor Edward called Will hopeless for trying to kick a magical spell. Will was surprised to see the speed of him doing magic spells. He was hurt badly and spit blood. Will was not even able to scratch Edward because he was so strong. Edward said that he would only do 2 spells. One was magic flames to burn Will, and the other was a magic shield to repel Will's attacks. Edward attacked Will by merging many magic spells together. Will was hurt badly by these magic attacks that he even struggled to stand up. He wished to have his sword. Colette was wondering about what Professor Edward was doing to Will in the supplementary class. That's when Kiki appeared with a bloody footprint. Kiki put her paws on Will's locker. Colette sensed that there was something wrong with Will. She opened his locker, grabbed the sword, and ran towards Spell Hall. Edward said to Will that if he couldn't even beat him, then he would never reach the heights of the tower. Edward asked Will how many wages were in the Battle of Garzaranso. Will replied with 1. Edward crushed Will's head under his shoe. Edward bragged about the power of magic. He said that a sword would never reach the level of a wand. Edward told Will to abandon his aspirations of becoming a magic vander. Will, resisting, tried to stand up and push the professor away. Professor Edward asked, "What drives you this much?" Will, holding his goggles, replied that he wanted to be with the person he loved. He wanted to keep the promise he made with Elfie. The professor was shocked to hear this. He said, "What a ridiculous and immoral reason this is." Will said that he would watch the sunset with Elfie one day, at any cost. Colette threw Will's sword to him. Will caught it and put on his goggles. He took a determined stand with a sword in his hand. Edward attacked Will with his magic. Will sliced through his magic attack with his sword. Edward attacked again with his full strength. Although Will was scared, he motivated himself by reminding himself this was the only path to becoming a magic vander. He narrated the heroism of the brave dwarven general named Gareth, who fought bravely even when he lost all his brethren. In honor of Gareth's bravery, mages recognized the dwarves' status. Will tricked Edward by throwing stones at him from one side. To Edward's surprise, Will attacked him from behind and was able to land a hit on Edward. Edward turned and said to Will that he was awarded 5 credits. Colette came running to congratulate Will, but he was fully exhausted from the battle. Professor Werkner was impressed by how Will hid himself and attacked from a blind spot overhead. Principal Cauldron acknowledged the power of Will's strike, which broke through Professor Edward's shield.